talk a little bit about like where you're from, uh, how you've spent time around the country as an artist, and where you're joining us from, and
Mhm.
uh, just a little brief history of Joseph Lee and his geographical artistic journey.
I am from Seattle, Washington, the beautiful Pacific Northwest. I grew up there. I still have family there. I go back there for every once in a while to visit and to see folks. Um, I spent about 2 years after graduating from high school. I spent 2 years at a small liberal arts college called the University of Puget Sound in Tacoma, Washington, abbreviated UPS. So lots of jokes about students wearing brown uniforms and driving delivery trucks. And I studied with an amazing teacher there. His name is Dwayne Hulbert. And so he kind of took my playing to that next level out of high school. And in the process of that, he took me to one of his chamber music festivals in Provence, France. And I met a whole bunch of musicians from New York, students from New York, who were there as well from some other teachers that he knew. And I realized that I needed to have that New York experience. I needed to be the tiny fish in the very, very big pond. and so I transferred after my second year to the Manhattan School of Music, studied with the late Philip Kaywin, who just passed away of cancer a few months ago, I believe. But if you look on his Facebook wall, you can just see all of the students that he made his mark on in terms of practice ethics, the love of the art form. And I still use things that he taught me, that those 3 years that I studied with him at Manhattan School of Music. And then as I got to the end of my 3 years there, I started playing auditions for singers who were completely unknown quantity to me, and I just loved it. I loved the rep. I loved, being in the rehearsal room with him. It was a social experience versus the pianist experience of like being in a room by yourself for 8 hours.
Yeah.
And so one of the teachers there, Tom Morocco, after hearing me play an audition for a singer, he said, "Is this something that you want to do for a career?" I said, "Sure. Why not try at least?" And so my grad school years, I spent also at Manhattan School of Music with Tom Morocco. One of the questions that was asked at my audition at Manhattan School of Music for the opera collaborative department was by Warren Jones, who asked me the question, "Joseph, do you like singers?" And I said, some student academic answer about, "Oh yes, I love rehearsing with singers. I love playing their repertoire." And he said, "No, Joseph, do you like singers?" And you know what? I don't remember what my answer was. But clearly I fell in love with singers on my way after that. So that process of starting over is something that I'm pretty familiar with, both geographically and profession-wise. After I finished my grad degree in Manhattan School of Music, I spent a few more years there just getting experience, trying to work out what this crazy thing called opera and art song and vocal collaboration was. And then I took an audition for Houston Grand Opera, the studio program there. And I remember very distinctly meeting Kathy Kelly, who worked with you all on Interstate, which was incredible, by the way. She conducted me through a scene from Salome, and I just had a blast. It was some of the hardest music I have ever played in my life, but it seemed like she was having fun with it too, and we were both singing at the top of our lungs in our voce di coche, and that sort of set the tone for the next phase of my life professionally. Went to Houston Grand Opera, moved to Houston about 2007, met you the summer after that, and then I spent, the last 14 years of my life has been in Texas. So Houston Grand Opera, then started teaching at Rice, and then started teaching at Baylor. And each of those have been a different step on this journey. And it feels right to be making this transition now.
We share some background at a place that I fondly refer to as the Trap, in Vienna, Virginia. And it has continued for me to be a place of sort of creative curiosity and artistic renewal. I'm curious about having made the transition from an artist in training from Manhattan School in Houston to then going on to somewhere like Wolf Trap. And I know you've done some coaching in other places as well, and then went into teaching. Is there a common sort of feeling that has led you from place to place? Is there something in particular you've learned from each of those places that you incorporate into your artistic practice? Just what's that sensation for you?
From a coach's perspective, there's always an element of teaching involved. Even in the most professional setting, a singer is gets so much from that feedback, and that feedback can be useful in a variety of ways, even if it's just to say, this is out of tune, this is out of tune, this is okay, this is, something that basic and that clinical to, hey, let's try doing that piece and thinking of unicorns, so there's a teaching element in the collaboration element of being a coach. And so it seemed like I don't know how other coaches feel about it when they take an academic job, but there's something in it that feels very, very at home and very comfortable. And it feels really good also just imparting some of that knowledge to the next generation and helping them to succeed and wanting them to succeed and helping them benefit from your knowledge and from the knowledge of your past mistakes. And that's one of the biggest common denominators from job to job.
As you're talking, I'm thinking a little bit about how whether you are a professional singer or a singer in training, how you receive what a coach tells you, or the coach's body language in a rehearsal or in a coaching setting is personal, and it's unique about how you fit with that artist. And one of the people that I have found so fascinating to be able to work with and watch for many years was Steve Blyer, who co-founded the New York Festival of Song, and he was really the first person who told me that I could sing whatever I wanted to sing. Because I trained for so long, so specifically to sing in opera and to try and fit into what I thought was a very specific place. And in some earlier attempts to really dig into song repertoire, whether that was classical or American song from different genres, I never really felt like I was convincing in that space until I got to work with Steve, and having someone say, A, you can do this, and B, you don't have to do it like anyone else did it before you, was just the most extraordinary idea. And I know that you continue to work with Steve on a regular basis, which I'm very jealous of, but what's that, how has that influenced your style in teaching and performance?
I feel like the more experience I have gotten, the more I feel secure enough to inhabit that mindset that Steve imparts so beautifully to people, meaning there isn't one way to do this. One of the things that Kathy Kelly said in the masterclass setting with a singer was, okay, there's probably 13 ways to do this. I know about 7 of them, but let's try this.
So also, as you were talking, I was thinking a little bit about, this, it feels like there's such a massive soulful and cultural shift going on that opera is certainly not immune to within our country and to some extent the world. And from time to time, there are things that I think about as we're starting to imagine how to make opera wider, more inclusive, more expansive, more welcoming for a greater breadth of artists and their impact. Because of course, the form itself was created to be the most collaborative, complex kind of art making that you could do in the moment. And I think it continues in that way. But for like a couple hundred years now, we're an art form that has largely recycled a lot of work. And we've trained in what's largely an acoustic space to be able to physically make these noises that can carry over beautiful and often immense orchestras in very large halls. And as we start experimenting with the form more and more, I think we're all holding a lot of anxiety about the balance between honoring the rigor of the practice that we've all been trying to cultivate in our own bodies, and also wondering if we, how do we expand the form, and is that technique still required? Or if you're going to bend a style, if you're going to sing something from the bel canto period and you're going to sing it in a slightly different way, one step to the right and all of a sudden you're scatting jazz. And is that still opera? I mean, but it's a long, complicated conversation, and as a coach, I'm curious, and now as a part of the team that will really set the path forward for Minnesota Opera, I'm curious, where's your head in that game?
Oh man, how long did you say you wanted this to go?
I know. We probably should wrap it up in 10 minutes or so, but yeah, I mean, right? It's like a seminar for a weekend.
I do hear every once in a while kind of this desperate need to grab onto the vestiges of what opera is or what people think it should be. There's a lot of people who will say, "Oh, that's not opera." That's the way that a lot of art forms are, right? Jazz is notorious for this. People will just comment right and left, and somebody does this amazing improv thing, and they're like, "Oh yeah, that's not jazz." And so there's this raging debate, which is healthy for sure. One of the big points I brought up when I would do outreach shows at schools and was, to find, okay, what's the difference between opera and musical theater? What's the difference between opera and some other art form? And one of the first things I would seize on would be microphones, right? And now that's not really the distinguishing factor. It is definitely a big one, but opera companies are doing crossover pieces all the time, and oftentimes those crossover pieces demand amplification just because of the way that a singer's part is written and what the singer is competing with from the orchestra.
And in some cases, the size of the hall that piece was originally written for, and the size of the space that we sing in now, which is, multiples greater than for where it was originally designed.
Right. So, am I saying, well, maybe we should use microphones for The Ring? And that's probably not what I'm advocating. But what about the stuff, like you said, that stuff that we're writing now, the stuff that we're writing for the future? Could that involve some amplification? Sometimes, all the time. I think we should be open to what it might involve. And as far as the technique that's demanded of a singer to sing this medium, this operatic medium, I think that technique can still be much of what it was, over the hundreds of years that opera has been being done, with the adaptations of knowing what the world is going to demand from this point out. I think one of the fun things that teachers say is healthy singing is healthy singing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that is where we can start as far as the conversation goes with people who are worried about, well, should I invest in this technical stuff I'm doing right now because I don't know what the form is going to be like when I get into the professional world.
Yeah.
Healthy singing.
All right. So to wrap us up, I have a couple shorter questions that I'm just going to try and fire in relatively rapid succession. Thing you are most looking forward to about living in Minnesota?
Christmas weather. Winter weather. I know in February the high will probably be around -3. I've experienced this when I was there for Art as a Verb. I'm looking forward to that. I really am.
Thing you will miss most about leaving Texas?
Tex-Mex, Chewy's. It's a thing, y'all. It really is a thing. Don't knock it till you try it.
One of the alumni from our resident program, who's a stage director, who has directed both our opera performances at CHS Field and Allianz Field, David Toro, introduced Karen Quisenberry and I to a diner in Uptown that has horchata soft serve ice cream. And let me just tell you that it's a good experience and not one I had had before. So you may have to give up on some Tex-Mex, but we'll get you some horchata soft serve when you arrive.
That's a beautiful consolation prize. Thank you.
Favorite experience thus far with Minnesota Opera?
I'm going to have to give a shout out to Jenny Hauser here. We did a song for your opening night gala, I believe. The song was I'm Old Fashioned. And she and I just kind of had one of these Steve Blyer moments of, want to do this? Maybe we should do this. Experiment, That was really, really special. So hi, Jenny. Thank you for that.
Because you all did that one, and you also did the theme song from La La Land that night.
Yes.
Because we were having a Hollywood themed gala to welcome our Dom Pasquale that season. That was a really great party. And to have the after party with Jujubee and all, all of those other folks joining us was super fun and made for a very memorable night. Well, I'm looking forward to having you on the team and helping us chart the course forward and more conversations like these to come.